The feedlot was always kind of here. My grandpa Holtman started it. When Dad came back full-time in 1973, then my grandpa Holtman kind of stepped back. The late 70s, my dad was at a M-Singer conference in, I believe it was in Arizona. And he stumbled into this empty conference room where there was like a breakout session. And it was Alan Savory speaking on grazing management and land management and ecosystems. And when he listened to him, everything that he was saying, it just really spoke to him. And it was like, this just makes sense. We had some cropping land and then some continuous grazing land, and he transitioned all of that into 3 different grazing cells and 65 different paddocks. And that's what I am currently managing. So the feedlot itself is 5,500 head one-time capacity. So not large by any stretch of the imagination, and that's just how I like it. And then the land base, I believe we have about 850 grazing acres. And we run yearlings on that in the summertime. We own cropland, but we don't farm it for cropping purposes for our own feedlot. We just graze and run the feedlot. I'm lucky in that the area that I'm in, people are happy to grow corn for us in our area. And so I have a custom grower that, believe it or not, used to work for us 40 years ago, and now he has his own land and he grows corn for us every year. We have a great relationship. And I'm always able to pick up a barley field here and there because barley goes into rotation in high value crops really easily. And when we started to pencil out how much it costs to own all the equipment and own all the land, we were really good at grazing. The land that we had was really more suited towards grazing. We're on 90% aeolian sand. Like, it's not, if you don't have irrigation, then it's pretty much grassland. He was really passionate about grazing, and I kind of grew up with that. And so the farming aspect was never something that really appealed to me either. So it works really well in our context. It might not work for everybody, but it seems to work really well for us. But when I sit down with my nutritionist, we go over, okay, these are the commodities that are available to me. What is the best bang for my buck, so to speak, that I can get all these different cattle to all these different goals in the most cost-effective way? We all know how good grazing animals are for the land. Like, we always knew that our land had increased in production and increased in organic manner. And you could see that the water cycle was better, and we could see the mineral cycle was functioning really well, and we could see the wildlife. We could see all that, but we never really quantified it. And so part of how I kind of got into quantifying it was I was actually arguing with an oil lease guy, and he was offering me a really low value. And I said, yeah, but that's for marginal grazing land. You're not talking marginal grazing land. And he said, well, how can you tell me that your land isn't marginal? It's right beside everybody else that's got marginal grazing land and is getting paid this. And I said, because I'm doing way more. I have way more animals on, my stocking rate is higher. He said, prove it. Dad is really good at keeping records. And so then I went back and dug out all of his grazing charts from 1980, and we were able to quantify where we had started and where we were currently. And so what I found was we had increased the stocking days per acre by 3,862% from the day we started. And that was shocking to all of us. We had no idea. We knew we started really low, we knew we were stocking really high. So I mean, the benefit to the land is, it's clear to all of us. I mean, we know that grazing animals on the land has just been phenomenal and continues to be phenomenal. My challenge now is Dad took this marginal land and brought it all the way up to here. Now I have to go further, and I really struggle with that. I really struggle with that. I've seeded everything you could possibly think of to seed. I've done all the things. I've bale grazed and I've done all the things, and I just, you make little tiny marginal, but I haven't really pushed past. So that's my struggle now. The way that the feedlot kind of integrates into the grazing, I always think of the feedlot kind of as a tool. I have this ability to put grazing animals out, and I can put out 800 head to start, and know that if I don't get rain or I need to slow down or I see something coming up, I can pull animals off at any time. When you're grazing yearlings, everybody goes out in April and May and they buy their yearlings. You know, the price of yearlings goes way, way, way up. I have the ability to buy my yearlings in January and feed them, and I know what my feed cost is. Hopefully when I put them out in May or April, I'm below what I would have been paying market price for those grazing yearlings. So it kind of adds a marketing aspect as well as the grazing aspect. The other part of the marketing aspect is when we get to August and we're ready to sell them, I kind of have the ability to go, okay, I have this 800-pound animal. I could sell right off grass. What can I sell that for? Okay, that doesn't make sense. I won't make money doing that. Let's pull them into the feedlot, put on another 100 pounds. Let's see what they're worth as 9 weights out of the feedlot. Can I make money doing that? Most times I can. But I also kind of go, okay, 900 pounds now, like every other feedlot owner does. If I fatten them and come out in April and May, what does that look like? Can I contract them? Can I feed them out? Can I make money doing that? So it gives me a lot of flexibility. It's not just, okay, I gotta buy them in April, sell them in September, and that's that. Without the feedlot being a part of my whole system, it's like a 3-legged stool. If I take that leg off of my stool, it falls over. Dad went to a course in, oh boy, the early 90s probably, on composting. Like one of Doug's big things when you go to a course is start out small, don't do anything big, like start it with just a few, you know, and see if you can make good compost. That's not what Dad did. Dad came home and made 8,000 ton on his first time. So the reason why he did it though is he kind of saw that this product that we were producing from the feedlot could be upcycled and made into a higher value product. And in our context, again, I'm surrounded with these really high value irrigated crops, and it's a very high value product for them. I honestly could build a bigger feedlot so that I could produce more compost. Once a year, we haul out our manure and bedding from the pens in May. We put it into compost rows, and then we monitor the temperatures and turn it with, we have a Sittler 1014 compost turner. And then once it's done, we kind of let it cure for about 6 weeks, and then we haul it out. I have a bunch of compost customers that haul it out in trucks, and they put it on the corners of their fields, and then we spread it with vertical spreaders. Some of it gets put into totes, and then we sell that just to people that want to use it in their gardens or landscaping or whatever in the area. Again, Dad was at some random conference and ran into Bud Williams and really enjoyed what he was saying. It made so much sense the way that he was talking about like the principles and the mindset and the techniques, like it just made so much sense to him. So we said to him, hey, if you ever want to come to Canada, I have a feedlot. I would love to work with you on the cattle handling aspect. And I remember Bud and Eunice staying at our house. They would work cattle for 12 or 14 hours a day, all day long. When the mindset shift happened for my dad and my mom at the time, it really changed the whole feeling of the whole feedlot. There were employees that just couldn't go there. They just couldn't. And Dad was so committed to it, he just said, no, like we are going down this path, and if you aren't gonna come with us, then you'll have to find another place. But one of the main things that I did, like that really pushed me to taking over the feedlot, is we were approached by a customer that wanted us to feed natural cattle. And I hate that term just as much as anybody else, but all natural is just no prophylactic antibiotics on arrival. We started out that fall, and I think we only started with 2,500 head, like half the feedlot. And then we kind of progressed. And then 2017, 2018, we fed 4,500 head of all natural cattle. And the key to doing that was a lot of direct cattle that came straight from the ranch right to our yard. They were supposed to be pre-vaccinated. So that was a really big key in success of that. But the other huge part of that was the cattle handling. In 2017, 2018, we fed 4,516 head of natural cattle. And so they came in to me, the average weight was 451 for the heifers. We had a 0.98% death loss, and 4.74% of them we had to treat with antibiotics. And then on the steers, they came in at 508 on average. We treated 6.06% of them, and we had a death loss of 2.19%. It changed how we thought and how we felt about working cattle. It changed the relationship and how we communicate with cattle. What we noticed, there were certain lots within these groups that would come in and we had a way higher stress level. You put them in their pen and they're pacing the fence lines like zombies and mooing, and they don't even know where they are. Those animals were the ones where we had the higher death loss and the higher treatment rate. If cattle are in that much of a high stress place, they're not finding water, they're not finding the feed, they're pacing, their cortisol levels are high. If you've vaccinated them, you're probably not getting an effective use of vaccines. So we really tried to, within the first 24 hours especially, slow that pacing movement. That's the first goal when we're settling calves, is just to slow that movement. You can put a bud box in all day long. You can put the wrong person in there, and all of a sudden that's not a bud box anymore. A bud box has nothing to do with low stress cattle handling. I have a hard time with low stress cattle handling too, because I feel like low stress cattle handling implies that you're doing things slow. I give pressure. There is a lot of pressure when I'm working cattle, and there's fast movements and there's direct movements. When I talk about low stress cattle handling, I kind of mean that that's the end result. Slow that pacing movement. That's the first goal when we're settling calves, is just to slow that movement. Hopefully stop it. What we find is when we're in there and those cattle are pacing the fence line like zombies, if we can get in front of them and just get a stop, and we might walk back, I can hear Dylan in my head, give ground, give ground, give ground, give ground, and it's like they come out of this trance and they can see you. We call it the grade 8 slow dance. But we just rock back and forth. Bud used to say, those cattle get used to a blanket on the fence. Don't be a blanket on the fence. You always have to kind of keep moving. But we didn't want to step into the pressure zone. You just want to be on the outside, right on the fringe of the pressure zone. And eventually those cattle, it's amazing. They'll drop their heads, they'll turn, and they'll do one of three things. They'll go to the bedding pile, they'll go to the hay, or they'll go to the water. And if you stay at it, they'll go to the bedding pile and they'll drop. Like they'll drop to the ground and they'll rest. When we have the focus on rest, nourishment, and confidence when they first arrive, those are the three things that set us up for success. Once that stress level is down, then the most important thing is getting them up. Believe it or not, once you stop the movement, then you want to teach them proper movement and teach them how to drive. And so then it's getting them up and getting them to walk the four corners of their pen, maybe take them out the pen, down the alley, allow them to walk by you again. We're always ending with them, allowing them to find the bunk. We're not pushing them to the bunk, but when we end, we try to make sure that they are on their way up to the bunk, and they're usually, if we play our cards right, they're all lined up at the bunk eating. You have some drinking, some lying down. We've done some experiments with shrink, and everybody that owns a feedlot knows the value of shrink. I know that we can load a liner in 20 minutes or less and have those cattle walking on to the truck. I know that I can weigh the cattle before we even start loading, and then we weigh the truck after, and those two amounts are exactly the same. We don't have shrink when we're loading cattle. The key is that you have to have every single person on your team on board. Because I can go in there and settle calves and get them up and driving, but if my pen checker goes in there and is like, yeah, well, now it's undone everything that I've done. So it's really important to have your pen checking staff on board. Even your feed truck drivers, even like everybody needs to be on board. And I'm not saying that they have to be perfect and be professional at stock handling, but we have to be working towards this goal of, I'm going to become a better stock handler. Like, I'm continually training, and I've had a horrible turnover in staff and had next to no staff. Last year, it was only me and Trevor and my feed guy outside. We spend every single Wednesday for 8 weeks straight for about 4 or 5 hours a day with our staff training on how to handle and the techniques. And we practiced sorting, and we practiced taking them out of the pen, and we practiced settling, and we practiced driving, and we practiced using the bud box and putting them through the processing system and all of those things. But it really takes everyone being on board. When you're walking through the pen and you're pen checking, you have such an ability to teach those animals every single time you're in there. And you can teach them properly, you can teach them pressure and release and to walk away, or you can teach them to hook around and follow you. And that's not ideal when you're 5'1" and you're pen checking a pen of fat cattle that are 1,800 pounds. What does Shipwheel past the feedlot? Well, shortly before COVID era, I had a bookkeeper that was really interested in bees and wanted to put some beehives up. So she did that. And then her life took her in a different way. So then we had these beehives. And so that started prior to COVID. But then during COVID, I was like, we're struck with this pandemic, and I didn't know what I was doing. How do you manage through a pandemic? I've never been through a pandemic before. Grass cattle were really expensive. We hadn't bought them yet. I didn't know if we were going to even be able to get grass cattle. The packing plants were all backed up. We were like, do we even buy these cattle? Like, what are we doing? Long story short, we did end up buying cattle, but what it pushed me into doing was, I need more than what we're currently doing. What I currently had been managing was pretty much all my dad stuff, right? And I was like, we need to do more. And he was even saying, you need to do more than what I did. I took this brainstorming wheel and I had everybody fill it out. Give me ideas on things that you think we could add to Shipwheel that would still fit our holistic goal. We chose to add pastured chickens, and we started selling the eggs. So we converted an old horse trailer into a chicken coop, and we had one of those movable nets, and we grazed chickens all summer. We added fruit orchard. So I always wanted fruit trees on the yard. So we planted a bunch of fruit trees. Market garden. So we started a garden, but of course I can't do a normal garden that you till, and I needed to do a no-till chaos garden. My bookkeeper came into my office one day with a tote, and she stuck it on my desk and said, I brought 250 friends with me to work today. And I said, what? And she says, I think that we should start doing worm castings and making worm casting compost. And she opened the lid and there was all these worms in this bin. And I was like, how do we make worm casting compost? We started with 13 bins of worm castings. We decided we needed a person because myself, my bookkeeper, Trevor, we were all trying to manage like little enterprises, plus then also run a small feedlot and a yearling grazing program. We felt like we needed the person to really help lift those enterprises up and get them going. We built a little building to put the worm casting composting in, and then left a little bit of room with my dreamy idea of eventually I wanted to open a store. Well, when I hired the person, she said, let's open the store. And so we just opened the store. And we called it the Green Mercantile. We called it the Green Mercantile because that was the name of my great-grandfather that came over on a boat from Sweden. And we sell meat and eggs and honey that are Shipwheels, and we sell compost and worm castings. And then we have local vendors that are all Canadian. We wanted it to be like a local farm store. Part of what speaks to me is creating connections between animals and people and the environment, and it's so important to me. I feel like there's such beautiful parts of the feedlot industry that are just not being told, and we need to tell it. We represent a lot of cattle and a lot of pounds of cattle. There's lots of cow-calf ranchers. There's a lot of voices. But I don't feel like we have as many voices in the feedlot industry. And so that's a way that I can use my voice. And I am team beef. As long as we're doing it to the best of our ability for the animals, the people, and the environment, great.